The council hall breathed like a living thing. Light slid across crystal walls. Air hummed with restrained power. 12 ancient species sat in silence, their seats carved by 10,000 years of rule. At the center stood one human woman, alone on polished stone. Her boots echoed too loudly. Her heartbeat felt louder still. Above her, the elder races watched without blinking. This was not a debate. This was a verdict waiting to be spoken. When the High Arbiter rose, the temperature dropped, and every instinct in her screamed the same warning. Humanity was about to be erased from the only home it had left. High Arbiter HFY unfolded his tall, crystalline frame. Age had clouded his facets, but his voice still rang clear through the chamber. "The matter before us is simple," he said. "For 3 centuries, humans have lived within the Stellar Accord. They arrived as refugees. We welcomed them. But now we must decide whether they strengthened us or weakened us." Ambassador Elena Vasquez lifted her chin. She had spoken for humanity for 15 years. She had faced war councils and trade summits. She had never felt fear like this. Around her, the elder races watched. The Velith refracted the chamber lights like living glass. The Thisari clicked their mandibles, hive minds whispering calculations. The Rethkai shifted on webbed limbs, skin slick with unease. Keithor continued. "Humans now operate our shipping routes. They staff our hospitals. They translate our treaties. They teach our young. They have become necessary." A ripple moved through the chamber, and that, he said calmly, is the danger. Elena felt the words land like a blade. "We are dependent on a species barely risen from its cradle," Keithor said. "They have woven themselves into our system so deeply that we no longer see where they end and we begin. This is not partnership. This is contamination." Elena stepped forward. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. "High Arbiter, with respect, you asked for our help," she said. "When your trade networks collapsed under complexity, you hired human coordinators. When your hospitals failed across species lines, you recruited human doctors. When your diplomats could not speak without starting wars, you brought in human mediators." She turned slowly, meeting alien eyes one by one. "We learned your languages, your customs, your fears. We solved problems no one else wanted to touch, and now you want to punish us for succeeding." Keithor inclined his head. "You misunderstand. We do not wish to punish humanity. We wish to preserve ourselves." His gaze settled on her, unreadable. "For 10,000 years, the Stellar Accord stood strong before humans arrived. We will stand strong again after humans leave." The vote was called. Lights flared as representatives made their choices. One by one. Silent. Final. Captain Yulan Tesh, merchant delegate of the Rethkai, hesitated. Her lower hand shook as she cast her vote against expulsion. She had worked beside humans her entire life. She knew what they carried that others did not. She was one of 3. 9 lights sealed the decision. "The purity mandate passes," Keithor announced. "Humanity has 1 standard year to vacate all Accord space. This is not exile, it is liberation." The chamber exhaled. Elena stood very still. "You believe we are your problem," she said quietly. "We are not. We are your solution. And when we are gone, you will finally see how many problems you truly have." She turned and walked away. She did not look back. The exodus began within days. Starports filled with silence instead of voices. Families packed lives into cargo crates. Children clutched toys shaped for worlds they would never see again. Humans said goodbye to neighbors who would not meet their eyes. Captain Yulan watched a human freighter lift from her station. The ship's commander, Sarah Chen, had managed Yulan's shipping routes for 20 years. "I voted against it," Yulan said through the channel. "I tried." Sarah smiled, tired but warm. "I know," she said. "Take care of yourself. And when things start falling apart, remember we warned you." The channel closed. Yulan told herself the Accord would adapt. It always had. Still, something in her chest would not settle. On the Velith homeworld, Keithor watched human ships rise like stars flowing backward into darkness. An aide stood beside him, young and uncertain. "Did we choose correctly?" the aide asked. "We did," Keithor said without pause. "Humans are adaptable, clever, tireless. Those traits made them dangerous. They softened us." They blurred our identity. What will become of them? Quote, "They will survive," Kethor replied. "They always do." He did not hear the word he used. Infection. The last human vessel crossed the Accord border exactly 1 year later. Elena stood at the viewport as the markers faded behind her. 1,000 star systems lay beyond. Trillions of lives. The greatest civilization the galaxy had known. She wondered how long it would take them to notice the silence. Celebrations followed. Purification rites. Ceremonies of renewal. Songs of unity. No one noticed the empty chairs. The shipping coordinator, replaced by a Thessari hive, could not reroute around storms. Convoys stalled. Cargo rotted in vacuum holds. The hospital wards grew quieter. Machines reported perfect diagnostics. Patients still died. Diplomatic messages went unanswered. Misunderstandings lingered. Old tensions breathed again. Small failures. Invisible failures. Kethor Vial retired that night satisfied. History, he believed, would remember him as a guardian. 6 months passed. Captain Yulan stood in her office, staring at reports that made no sense. Convoys misrouted. Supplies misplaced. Entire routes frozen. Her new logistics overseer spoke without emotion. The optimal route remains unchanged. "The route is blocked," Yulan snapped. "We need a new one. Recalculation requires 6 days. The cargo will rot in 4. Then the cargo will rot." Yulan dismissed him and sat alone in the silence Sarah Chen had once filled with solutions. Across the Accord, systems strained. In a medical station on Velos Prime, patients died quietly. A Rethkai physician reviewed old records and found a human nurse who had caught what machines never could. In the diplomatic spires, talks collapsed into shouting. And in the darkness of his chambers, Kethor Vial remembered Elena's words, "We are your solution." The first cracks had already formed. They were spreading. And no one left inside the Accord knew how to stop them. The celebrations ended quietly. No alarms sounded, no fleets burned, no stars went dark overnight. The stellar Accord did not fall with fire or screams. It weakened the way ice does before it breaks, silently, invisibly, until weight alone was enough to shatter it. Captain Yulan Tesh stood in her shipping tower, watching traffic drift across her hollows. Once, the lanes had pulsed with precision. Now, icons blinked yellow, then red. Convoys arrived late. Some arrived empty. Others never arrived at all. She read the reports again. Wrong destinations, duplicate manifests, missing authorizations. Everything was correct on paper. Everything was wrong in reality. Her new Thessari coordinator stood beside her, mandibles still. "The system is functioning as designed," he said. "Then the design is killing us," Yulan replied. She remembered Sarah Chen standing in this very room, barefoot on the polished floor, rerouting half a sector with instinct and memory instead of equations. Sarah had known which portmaster owed her a favor, which captain would take a risk, which storm could be threaded instead of avoided. None of that existed in the system. None of that existed anymore. Across Accord space, Velos Prime Medical Station dimmed its lights earlier each cycle. The wards grew quieter, not because fewer patients arrived, but because fewer survived. Dr. Thassan Kaur, veteran of 4 interspecies plagues, stared at a wall of perfect diagnostics. Every scan was clean, every protocol followed, every death unexplained. He opened an archived personnel file. Human. Name, James Okoro. Position, intake assistant. The notes were informal, almost careless. Identified secondary indicators missed by automation. Noted inconsistencies in patient behavior. Improved outcomes by 12%. Thesson checked the current year. Without James, misdiagnosis had risen sharply. Not because machines failed. Because machines did not notice tired eyes, hesitant voices, pain that patients did not have words for. Humans had noticed. They always had. In the diplomatic spires of Aurelian Station, voices rose instead of solutions. A trade agreement stalled. then collapsed. Old insults resurfaced. Old pride flared. An aide whispered to her supervisor, "The terms are the same as last cycle." "Why is this failing?" The supervisor answered softly, "Because there is no human in the room." "What did humans do?" They listened. Anger turned to fear. Fear turned to threats. Threats turned into mobilization orders. The first skirmish between Accord members in 4,000 years ignited over a misunderstanding that would once have lasted 10 minutes. Exile received the reports daily. Shipping delays, medical anomalies, diplomatic unrest. "Adjustment pains," he said. But the reports kept coming. Markets began to shake. The cred, stable for 6 millennia, trembled. Then cracked. On Nexus Prime, trading floors fell silent, as values collapsed in hours. Merchants who had woken wealthy were ruined by dusk. Riots flared. Banks locked their doors. "Explain," Keithor demanded. "The algorithms are flawless," his advisors said, "but markets are not numbers alone. They are fear, hope, rumor." "Who adjusted for that?" Silence answered him. Far from Accord space, Ambassador Elena Vasquez read the same reports from a different vantage point. The human exile fleet had not scattered. It had gathered. Stations bloomed inside a distant nebula the Accord had never charted. Trade lanes formed. Schools opened. Hospitals hummed. "They are collapsing," her aide said quietly. "Yes," Elena replied, "because we were never just workers. We were the bridges." She felt no triumph, only grief. Back in Accord space, the collapse accelerated. Supply chains failed. Hive cities starved. Research stations fell silent because ideas could no longer cross species lines. The pieces still worked. They simply no longer fit together. Then the Velith began to die. Their crystalline biology depended on synthetic elements maintained by human chemists. Without them, the process decayed. Birth rates fell. Elders crumbled. Keithor stood on his balcony and watched his people weaken. The stars above him looked colder now. "Find the humans," he ordered at last, "before it is too late." But humanity was already gone beyond their reach. Captain Yulan found them first. She arrived expecting refugees. She found a civilization being born. Human stations glowed with life. Trade moved. Voices filled corridors. Elena received her privately. "You built all this in less than 2 years," Yulan said, voice breaking. "We stopped holding up someone else's world," Elena replied, "and started building our own." "The Accord is dying," Yulan whispered. "Please help us." Elena's eyes softened, but her voice did not. "Tell them to stop looking for servants," she said, "and start asking as equals." Yulan left with shame and understanding heavy in her chest. Back in Accord space, wars ignited. Markets collapsed. Systems unraveled. And at last, in the quiet of his chambers, Keithor admitted the truth. They had not expelled a contamination. They had expelled their heart. 3 years after the purity mandate, the Stellar Accord still used its old name. But it was only a name now, painted on the hull of a sinking ship. The Grand Hall on Concord Spire Station remained open. Delegates still arrived in ceremonial vessels. They still spoke in careful tones and pretended the center held. Outside the station windows, trade lanes that once glittered with movement lay thin and empty. 7 member species had withdrawn. 2 were at open war. The Thessary hive worlds had sealed their borders, choosing survival over unity. Research stations went dark. Colony worlds went hungry. Billions died the way civilizations truly die, not with one great explosion, but with 1,000 quiet failures. Keithor was no longer High Arbiter. He had resigned in disgrace when even his own people could not ignore the crumbling. The purity mandate now had a new name, spoken in bitter whispers: the death sentence. Still, he lived. Older. Fractured. His crystalline body looked like a storm had passed through it, and he carried the weight of every report he had dismissed. A courier entered his chambers on the Velith homeworld and knelt, breathless. "We found them," the courier said. Keithor did not speak at first. He did not trust his voice. "Where?" he asked. "In a nebula beyond the gray reach. The humans have built stations. They have trade lanes. They have allies. They are thriving." The word hit him harder than any insult. Thriving. He looked up at the stars through the balcony glass and remembered the day he had watched human ships leave. He had called it healing. Now he saw it for what it was: amputation. He ordered 3 ships prepared. Not a fleet, not an armada, a plea. The delegation was small. Representatives from the 5 species that still clung to the Accord's fading authority. They did not come with demands. They came with empty hands and exhausted faces. Kethor led them without title, without ceremony, without pride. The journey took weeks through unstable lanes and dead trade corridors. Their nav systems were flawless. Their instincts were not. When they finally reached the nebula, the view on the main screen stole the last breath from the room. Human stations hung in the glowing mist like lanterns in a dark sea. Dock rings spun with traffic. Cargo drones flashed between bays. New-built starships moved with confident purpose. There it was again, that human kind of movement, fast and improvised, as if the future was something you could build with your bare hands. A delegate whispered, voice breaking, "They will never help us." Kethor stared at the screen until his vision blurred. "We must ask anyway," he said, "because we have no other choice." They were received by human security at a docking gate that looked plain and practical. No grand arches, no crystal thrones, no elevated platforms. Just steel, light, and people who looked you in the eye. Kethor felt something unfamiliar. Not fear of violence, fear of judgment. He was guided into a simple conference room. A table, chairs, a wall screen. And at the far end, standing without guards and without show, was the woman he had expelled, President Elena Vasquez. She looked older now, lines at the corners of her eyes, a tiredness that spoke of sleepless years. But her posture was steady, and her gaze had not softened. "Kethor Vale," she said, "I did not expect to see you again." He stepped forward slowly. Every step sounded too loud in the quiet room. His delegates watched him like witnesses at an execution. He stopped at the center. And then he did what no Velith leader had done in 10,000 years. He knelt. "I am no longer High Arbiter," he said. "I am nothing. My people are dying. The civilization one led is dust, and I am the one who scattered it." His voice cracked like a fault line. "I come to you as a beggar. I come to ask for mercy I do not deserve." Silence filled the room. Elena did not move. She let the silence stretch until it burned. Then she spoke. "Stand up." Kethor blinked, confused. "Stand up," she repeated. "I will not negotiate with someone on their knees. That is not how humans do things." Slowly, painfully, he rose. His joints creaked. His facets caught the room light in broken reflections. Elena walked around the table and stopped in front of him. She was smaller than him by half, flesh and bone, fragile by every old metric, yet she felt like stone. "You called us a contamination," she said. "You said your civilization would be purer without us." Her voice stayed calm. That was the cruelest part. "Look at your purity now. Tell me what it cost." Kethor swallowed. His throat felt dry despite not being flesh. "It cost everything," he said. "It cost lives. It cost peace. It cost the future." His eyes dimmed. "I was wrong." Elena held his gaze. "What truth did you finally see?" she asked. Kethor breathed in. He tasted shame. "That we were never independent," he said. "Not truly. The Accord survived because different species needed each other." His voice steadied as the confession found its shape. "But we could not work together. We could not understand each other. We did not know how to bend without breaking." He lifted his hands, palms open. "Humans did. Humans listened. Humans learned every language and every custom and every fear." Quote, his facets shimmered with the weight of it. "We did not push out a disease. We pushed out our heart." The delegates behind him shifted, some in pain, some in relief that someone had finally said it. Elena's expression did not change. "And now you want that heart back," she said. Kethor nodded once. "Yes, but not as servants. Not as convenient hands to use and discard." He forced the words out, each one a stone. "We ask you to return as equals. As partners. As neighbors." Elena studied him. Not his words, but the place the words came from. She searched for old arrogance hiding behind humility. She found only exhaustion and grief. The old accord is dead, she said at last. It cannot be saved. It should not be saved. Kithor's shoulders fell. A civilization built on hierarchy and exclusion deserves to fall, Elena continued. Despair tightened in Kithor's chest. Then Elena's voice shifted, firm but not cruel. That does not mean nothing can be built in its place. His head lifted. If we return, she said, we will not rebuild your old halls and pretend they were holy. Quote, she looked past him, as if seeing the billions who had paid the price. We will build something new, a true partnership, no elder thrones, no purity doctrine, no expulsions. Her eyes hardened. Ever again? Kithor nodded urgently. Yes, he said, agreed. Elena raised a hand, stopping him. You do not agree to words, she said. You agree to rules. Her voice became sharp, clean, absolute. No species can ever be pushed out again. Anyone who joins chooses to stay or chooses to leave. But no one is exiled. Agreed, Kithor said. The governing council is reformed. One species, one vote. Humanity included. No hierarchy based on age. Agreed. And there will be a memorial on every world, Elena said, not to honor anyone, to remember what bigotry costs. She leaned forward slightly. Every child will learn what happened. This mistake will never be buried. Kithor bowed his head. I will write it myself, he said. Let my shame teach them what my pride refused to. Elena was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded. Then we will talk, she said. We will return, not as your workers, not as your guests. Her voice softened, just enough to cut. As your neighbors. Hope, raw and painful, flickered through Kithor like a pulse of light. It felt unfamiliar. It felt undeserved. Thank you, he whispered. Elena's gaze held him in place. Mercy is not about deserving, she said. It is about choosing to help even after you have been hurt. She exhaled, the kind of breath that carried years. That is what humans do. She extended her hand across the space between them. Kithor stared at it. A small gesture, a simple thing. And somehow it felt heavier than any throne. You take it, Elena said. You hold it. It means we make a promise. Slowly, carefully, Kithor wrapped his crystalline fingers around her warm human hand. The contrast shocked him. Cold and warm, old and young, fragile and unbreakable. A promise, he repeated. Yes, Elena said. Her voice lowered. We will not return a third time. If you break this, you face the dark alone. Kithor felt the warning settle into him like a seal. I understand, he said. Outside the station, the nebula glowed with distant light. Somewhere far behind them, a dying civilization waited for a chance to be reborn. But the rebirth would not begin with a ceremony. It would begin with a choice that had to hold under pressure. Because even now, in the ruins of the Accord, there were leaders still searching for someone else to blame. And the moment they realized humans were coming back, they would decide whether to learn or whether to strike first.